Hi, folks. Welcome to Broadband Deployment News. The FCC has come out with the start date for performance testing for both RDOF and and this will be something that will be for the BEAD program as well. But actually, the date is for RDOF, and this is going to be the same kind of testing that will be required for the BEAD program. So be right back. We'll talk about that, and I'll go through a little bit of what those testing parameters and requirements are. Be right back. Thanks for joining me. Eric Cusey here with Broadband Deployment News. So you see here in this public notice from the FCC, Wireline Competition Bureau announces the start date for performance measures testing for the Rural Digital Opportunity Fund, or RDOF, as well as a fund for Puerto Rico and the U.S. Virgin Islands. But primarily here, what we're going to be talking about is RDOF specifically for the date. So you see here for carriers participating in the RDOF, pre-testing will begin on January 1st, 2025, and testing will begin on January 1st, 2026. So they have to do pre-testing first, which they need to set up all of their testing and go through it as if they're going to be doing their official testing, but it doesn't count. So if they fail or anything like that, that doesn't count towards that. But if they don't do this pre-testing, then they will lose some of their funds. So they have to do the pre-testing. And then following on a year later, they have to start their official testing and start that reporting to the FCC that will then be counting to whether they're meeting the performance requirements. Again, this is for RDOF. These are the same testing requirements that were developed for CAF II, the Connect America Fund. That was a predecessor to RDOF. And the BEAD program is going to be adopting these same performance testing, the same performance testing methodology as well. And I'm going to go through a little bit of what that methodology is here in just a minute, but let's read through this. So carriers failing to meet the required testing standards will be subject to withholding and or recovery of universal service support. Based on the level of non-compliance, carriers must conduct testing according to the Commission's performance measures testing requirements using a USAC, or Universal Service Administration Company, determined randomly selected sample of subscriber locations. And I'll discuss that here in a minute. All RDOF participants, regardless of authorization year, will begin pre-testing and testing on the same date. So it doesn't matter if somebody received their funds a while ago and then somebody, like one of the last ones that just got authorized to get their funds, they're going to have to begin their testing at the same time. But they've got a while. So it's going to be January 1st of next year to start the pre-testing, and then the actual testing starts the year after that. So they've got quite a while to get this going and then to do the pre-tests and then the official testing. And you have to remember that a lot of these programs, the RDOF funds have been mostly distributed, I think. Maybe all of it's been distributed at this point. And different service providers are in different stages of deployment. Some have probably deployed good portions of the network, and others haven't started, depending on when they are getting their funds and everything that they need to do there. So let's see. So the size of the sample is based on the number of subscribers in a particular area. I'll talk about that as well. To allow carriers to become accustomed to performance testing, the Commission implemented a pre-testing period that would occur prior to the commencement of each carrier's testing start date. During the pre-testing period, carriers must test the speed and latency of their network quarterly for a week-long period and submit the results within 1 week of the end of each quarter of pre-testing. However, no support reductions are assessed during the pre-testing period as long as carriers perform the pre-testing and report the results. Carriers that fail to conduct pre-testing and submit results on time will have 5% of their monthly support payments withheld until they come into compliance. So that's just the pre-testing part. And of course, they've got to do the real testing after that, and they've got to make sure that they do that or they're going to lose funds, and they've got to make sure that they pass or they lose funds. So, all right, so that's the public notice. I've got a link to that in the description of the video, as well as a link to this page, which is the USAC performance measures testing. There's a lot of information in here about how the testing is done, but I thought I'd go ahead and summarize some of that for you here. So let's take a look at that. So you see here the testing parameters. So this is for speed and latency, and those must be tested from an active customer premise to an FCC designated IXP, or Internet Exchange Point. So there's a specific place where the testing, performance testing, has to connect to, and it needs to be an active customer. So number one, internet service providers can't take something in their lab and go ahead and do testing with that. And it's all random, as we'll see here in a minute as well. So up to 50 locations per service tier per state must be tested. Depends on the number of subscribers. So it's a maximum of 50. So if you've got, doesn't matter how many, if you've got over 500 subscribers in a state, then you've got 50 that you've got to test across the state. If you're between 50 and 500, then they take 10% of that. If you're 50 or below, I guess it's probably 51 to 500. I guess it's 50 or below, then you do 5 basically. So that's the amount of testing that you have to do. And basically, there's a couple of different ways you can do it. Some are doing it through equipment, just through the equipment that they put in the home. Calix, for example, has their Gigasphere device router that can use, I think, TR69, I believe, or TR something, one of the standards, to connect up and do that performance testing. There's also companies that will do that. If you are looking for testing and not sure what to do, contact us. I'll have our contact information up here at the end of this video, and we can help you out with that. So if you need to do performance testing, either for RDOF or wondering what you're going to do for the BEAD program, if you haven't been working on this, then reach out to us here at the end of this. You see here, testing must take place 1 week out of each quarter. That must be between 6 p.m. and 12 a.m. local time. And I believe they have to do that every hour. You have to do it every hour. Speed and latency tests can be conducted in different weeks. So you can pick, as a service provider, can pick any week during that quarter to do your testing, or any 2 weeks. So you can do the speed and latency test during the same week, or you can do the speed tests 1 week and latency test another week. But you have to do all your speed tests in 1 week, and you have to do all your latency tests in 1 week. But those can be in different weeks if you want to do it that way. And I mentioned it's random. So USAC has a portal that the service providers go into. They upload all of their subscribers, or it may already be in there, possibly from data that they're supplying. And then there's a randomizer that then tells them the 50 subscribers that they need to test. And if there's some issue with that, for example, if it turns out that subscriber has downgraded to a plan that's not a plan that is covered, and this would be for RDOF. I think for BEAD, for BEAD, everything, they've got to be over 100 by 20, let's say, or they've got to be, over 100 by 20. So for any of those, it's got to be, if they're on a plan, like let's say they buy a plan that's 50 by 10, and they downgraded, then you can request that you get another subscriber because they're on a lower tier plan at that point, or something along those lines. There are different ways to submit a change to some of these. It's got to be for specific reasons, though. And let's see what else we got here. Performance requirements. So 80% of the speed measurements must be at 80% of the required speeds. So if you are, say, the required speed is 100 by 20, you need to be at least, or let's say over that, you need to be at least 80% of that 80% of the time. Single speed measurement, it's a single speed measurement of 10 to 15 seconds duration as you're doing the speed test. And you need to do at least one test per testing hour per location. And again, per location would be the 50 or so, however many folks that you're testing. You need to do at least one test per hour during that range of hours that I showed. And then latency, 95% of the latency measurements must be at or below 100 milliseconds round trip time. So that's for RDOF, and it's the same latency requirement for BEAD, 100 milliseconds round trip time or less. One latency measurement per minute for each testing hour at each subscriber test location. So every minute for each of those hours, you need to be testing each one of those subscribers to make sure that your latency is 100 milliseconds round trip time or less. And 100 milliseconds is not this huge bar. So this is not testing for good latency. This is testing to make sure that there's not bad latency, because 100 milliseconds round trip, 50 milliseconds each way is not this huge bar. It's to prevent, certain technologies can't do that, like satellite that is not low Earth orbit, a geosynchronous satellite where you've got 30,000 miles up, and as opposed to 250 miles up or 400 miles up, depending on where the low Earth orbit satellites are, let's say for Starlink or for OneWeb or Amazon Kuiper, where those are going to be. Those are going to have much lower latency. So 100 milliseconds, not a high bar. So really what you're looking for here is to make sure that the service provider, the service that they're providing is not high latency or bad latency. So that's something that they want to make sure that this latency is sufficient for most kinds of interactive kind of web things. And in fact, I was going to look here at what is this is in the BNOFO. So this is not RDOF. I just wanted to look at what's in the BNOFO now, because that's what everybody's kind of anticipating and waiting for. So this is what's in there. And again, it's going to be, I think, the same methodology and parameters, other than the differences, maybe, speed-wise, those kinds of things. So we've got here, NTIA adopts the compliance standards and testing protocols for speed and latency established and used by the Commission in multiple contexts, including the Connect America Fund and the RDOF. Subgrantees must perform speed and latency tests from the customer prem of an active subscriber to a remote test server at an endpoint consistent with the requirements for a commission-designated IXP or Internet Exchange Points. Again, that's all the same as the RDOF. Funded network shall deliver a reliable broadband service with speeds of not less than 100 by 20. Reliable broadband service, again, is defined in the BEAD Notice of Funding Opportunity as a wired technology that would be fiber. DSL is considered reliable broadband. Cable modem service would be considered reliable broadband as long as it's over 100 by 20, or a fixed wireless service that is using licensed spectrum or a combination of licensed and unlicensed spectrum. And that's always a question as to what that means. How much is licensed and how much is unlicensed, and what's your area, and what, I don't know how that all figures out. There's not been any further guidance that I know of on that, but that would be reliable broadband. So it's got to be that reliable broadband service, and then again, it's minimum 100 by 20, and again, you've got the same latency. In addition, 95% of latency measurements during testing windows must fall at or below 100 milliseconds round trip time. So everything that we're seeing now for RDOF, with that testing beginning January 1st, the pre-testing period, January 1st, all of next year basically, and then the real official testing that's going to count is January 1st, 2026. Is that right? Did I say those right? Let me go back here. Let's look at I'll make sure I get this right. So yeah, that's right. The January 1st, 2025. So it's January 1st, 2025. And then the real testing starts January 1st, 2026. So this tells you, and actually you're not looking at it, I am. So let's see, let's take a quick look at that. So this tells you that, once the BEAD program comes out, it's going to be a while before everybody's going to get their funding. Sometime, let's say early next year, 2024, right? So we're not even doing the pre-testing yet for RDOF at that point. But for BEAD program, the funds for that will start coming out in, let's say, 2024 sometime. And then it's going to be some period of time, maybe similar, where, because you've got to have time to build those networks, get everything in place, get customers signed up. Because again, it doesn't make sense to, you've signed up 10 customers. It doesn't make sense to start doing testing at that point. So there's a certain amount of time that they're giving internet service providers to get the networks built, to get subscribers signed up, to get enough subscribers signed up to be able to start doing performance testing. So again, we're looking at RDOF not starting the actual real testing until January 1st, 2026. You can expect BEAD to be several years, let's say a year or two after that, probably when the BEAD testing is going to be doing their pre-testing period. I'm assuming that's going to be the same, a pre-testing period, and then the real testing period from there. So anyway, that's finally, we have some dates on this. I know a lot of people have been wondering when that was going to start, so there you go. And again, if you need help with performance testing for RDOF or thinking about what you need to do for BEAD, reach out to us. You can see our website there, but really, I don't think we have anything up on performance testing, so you can reach out to us via email, or I've got our phone number there. If you're not subscribed to our channel here, go ahead and hit the subscribe button. Click the little bell to be notified when I'm live. And if this is helpful for you, if you would give me a like on the video, I'd appreciate it. Thanks for joining me, and I'll see you next time for Broadband Deployment News. Take care. Bye-bye.